start.
So, good evening. Well, this is Debbie Lacken, obviously from Kids Around Dogs, and this evening we have a proper gift. Sarah Fisher is here.
Oh.
Whoop, whoop. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm so excited for you to be here.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a great way to start 2022 as well. You're the first one of the year, so brilliant. I do think that practically everyone know at least of Sarah, but she's a canine and horse behaviorist as well. And the main part that you're doing now, I believe, is the animal center education. And you're offering courses for trainers and for professionals in general, I believe. And I'm sure that, you know, Sarah will explain it much better, much more in depth. On a personal note, I use your method with my clients, and a lot of my clients are children, and my own child is a child. So we use freework. I've done some courses with someone close to me, which is who's Rachel Beard, that has qualified with you, and I found it great. I found it fantastic, fantastic activity, if you can call it that children can really get involved with. And I just love it. And again, there is also much more things to know about free work, but on a simple level, if you like, kids can definitely get involved with this as a
definitely
activity. The only thing that has put me off to come to Tilly Farm, and this is Mary's fault, because Mary told me about camping, and I don't do camping. So when the first time that Mary and I talked, it was about like 4 years ago, she told me about camping. I'm like, oh, that's a place I never can go. Never mind.
No, I agree with you, Debbie. Words camping holiday are like putting the words fun run together. Doesn't work for me.
Yeah, exactly.
They should not be joined. I agree.
But so jokes aside, so Sarah, I'm gonna leave it to you. We're gonna ask questions to Sarah at the end, but you're free to put messages and questions in the chat, and then I'll pick them up and ask them at the end, or you can keep them for the end of Sarah's presentation. So
Debbie, could you do me a favor? Because I forgot to bring my phone into the room with me, and I lose the clock on my computer when I screen share. So can you tell me when I've been rabbiting on for about an hour and 10 minutes?
Okay, yeah.
Just to make
so about
sure I don't bore people.
Yeah. Okay, about 8:15, I'll signal you.
Jump in, please.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you.
Cool, thank you. Let me just get, there we go, the first screen up. Welcome everyone. I won't be able to see everybody on the gallery. So if you've got a burning question, please jump in. As I'm talking, I really don't mind people interrupting at all, because my brain will suddenly be sparked by something. If I don't have a pen or paper, I can suddenly feel the need to ask a question there and then. I was definitely a bull breed in my past life, which is why I think I connect with them on such a deep level in this. So if you have a burning question, I really don't mind if you interrupt me, but you'll need to actually speak, because I won't be able to see a hands up or anything in the gallery, if that's okay. Well, thank you very much to everyone who's come, and thank you, Debbie, in particular, for inviting me to share my passion. And that really is what it is. It's a passion, and I've been really fortunate to have been educated by the most amazing animal experts that exist over the last 27 years. And those experts are the animals themselves, because I feel that certainly the way I work today has been shaped by the only experts that exist, as I say. And I'm literally just the translator of what I've observed. So although I may be sort of named or described as the founder of animal-centered education. In reality, the founders of this approach are the animals, particularly the dogs at Battersea, and particularly dogs that shared my life, that I had either on foster or foster and then adopted. And I will talk about 2 of those amazing tutors through the presentation. The presentation is quite long, probably won't get through all of it, but I always try and put quite a lot in, just so that we can make sure there's something of interest to everyone, particularly if people have already been on courses with me before. There's so much information that I've obviously learned over 27 years, so I'm going to try and put it in a neat little package for you. And also what I said to Debbie is that I'll do a PDF of this presentation and email it to Debbie so she can share that with you. So if you don't want to take notes, please don't. So really, an ACE approach covers many aspects of connecting with incredible animals. And it was Linda Tellington-Jones that commented on the link between posture and behaviour in a book that I read about 28, 29 years ago. And that really sparked my interest. My original background was human anatomy and physiology and massage, but I'd always been around animals. I rode horses from the age of 4. I had my first dog, my own dog, from the age of 11, and was, you know, completely in love with all aspects of animal caregiving and guardianship. But originally went down the human massage route because a friend of mine had the most horrific experience where her young daughter was diagnosed with cancer when she was 18 months of age. And I spent a lot of time at Great Ormond Street Hospital with my friend and her daughter. She was a single parent, and Erin was born between my daughters, Emily and Daisy. So we were very, very close unit. And we were kind of Erin's extended family. And I don't know how you ever begin to process the concept that your child might die. And being on those wards with the parents who have had the worst news you're ever going to hear as a parent, I just thought, what can I do to help them? I can't change their life. I can't make their life better. I can't make their life different, but I can do something to maybe support them during these awful experiences on the oncology wards at Great Ormond Street Hospital. So I decided to learn massage because it was a way. I already knew about the importance of body contact, as long as that body contact wasn't threatening, in times of great stress. So actually that was sort of the motivator for me to learn a really gentle therapeutic form of massage, so that there was something I could take into a situation where there wasn't any hope for some of these parents at all, but maybe bring even moments of peace to their, you know, to their evenings or their day. So that's where I started that whole exploration of this link as well between the emotional and physical aspects of our life. And I remember walking down the corridors with my friend, and she kept walking into me, and I had to keep I was being almost pushed into the wall, and I'd have to step back and go around the other side of her, and then we'd carry on walking and talking, and she'd start pushing me into the wall on the opposite side of the corridor. And coming from the horse world, it was around the time where people were really saying, oh, you know, if an animal touches you without your permission, they're being dominant. People still had that belief system around dogs. If a horse walks into your space, he's being dominant. He wants to take over the world. And I knew that was never right. That's not how I was brought up, with a passion for animals that was instilled in me from, you know, generations, grandparents on both sides, and certainly both my parents as well. And I remember that moment walking down those corridors with Cynthia so vividly. Like, how could anyone even begin to understand that a being walking into the space of another being wants to dominate you? This friend is so emotionally distraught. Everything's been stripped away from her that was anchoring her in the crazy world we all live in. she is so emotionally out of balance, it's affecting her physical balance too. She has no concept that she's behaving in such a way. And there was another real standout moment for me when I was doing the massage training, where we were learning all sorts of different other modalities. It really was sort of a great immersion into the value of a multimodal approach for helping people that had physical issues and or emotional issues that was influencing the physical struggles that they may have had. And we were doing some kinesiology. And if you know kinesiology, it's about muscle testing. And I was working with this girl. I was in my 20s, and I think she was probably similar age. And I was muscle testing her for, I think we were muscle testing essential oils or something, I can't remember. And whatever she was holding in her hand weakened her whole frame. And she couldn't resist, as I was just feeling for the strength or lack of it in whatever it was we were testing. And she had an almost complete breakdown, because that moment, that one moment in an environment that she'd chosen to be in, it was a learning environment, it was a really in-depth course, it went on for over a year. We knew each other, you know, well by that stage. I think, I can't remember how many times we met to learn the practical side of it, plus loads of written work at home to do. No internet at that time. Yes, I'm that old. And she had a complete and utter breakdown because that moment triggered a memory of intense trauma for her, where she had no control over her body. And she was really shocked because she had been in speaking therapy for probably a decade at least. And she really thought she'd accepted and processed what had happened to her. But that moment of panic and vulnerability came back to her like that, as I was just doing this muscle testing with her. And that was a really, well, as you can tell, really powerful moment for me that I've never forgotten. And that reminded me of the power of the nervous system. So, and how it learns in one experience, and how it will always remember the worst that happened. So if you've really injured yourself, let's say you've twisted and dislocated an ankle, and the surgery and, you know, treatment has gone on for some time, and at the point of the accident, obviously you're in acute pain. Your nervous system, even 5 years, 10 years down the line, if you go and twist that ankle for that split second before the nervous system goes, hang on, might not be as bad as last time, for that split second, your nervous system will probably go into the same panic mode and have an expectation of that really intense pain, until the rest of the body kind of catches up and it starts to process all the detail of the information that it's receiving. And I think about these things a lot. And like I said, they were very powerful learning experiences for me in my 20s. And then when I learned about Linda Tellington-Jones's work, it all made sense to me. I'd already learned gentle body contact, skin rolling, a lot of the elements that were groundbreaking when it came to animal care, when Linda developed these concepts based on Feldenkrais over, you know, 40 years ago. And particularly the power of working with the nervous system, because that's obviously one quite important part of TTouch. And I think about this a lot when it comes to working with dogs, and when I was doing assessments and court cases and for Section 1 and Section 3 of the Dangerous Dogs Act. It was really important to me that all the dogs had a really good experience, and it was more of a learning experience for me rather than a testing of the animal, because we wanted to obviously find the truth to present to court, or the truth as best we could to present to court, but also wanted to be really mindful that what I did in those moments could be a tipping point for some dogs who were already probably quite emotionally distressed, whether they were in kennels or, you know, whether the guardian was stressing her to come to me because obviously court cases were going on, and also being able to find the kind of truth around what event may have put them in the position where they needed to have an assessment for a court case. And I think working with dogs such as those as well was also highly beneficial, because what my approach would always be was I never wanted to see witness statements till after I'd done an assessment with the dog in question. And it was mind-blowing how I could even make suggestions about what type of food the dogs were eating based on what was going on in their coat, and also actually almost replicate what had happened without ever pushing that dog to the point where the dog had to defend himself. So I learned a lot about the power of arousal around food without needing to trigger arousal in the dog, if that makes sense, because all these patterns are there. So the dogs in the shelter have educated me the most. Other dogs that got caught up in court cases, hugely educational too, because it was about finding clues. So I run a lot of courses based on ACE Dog Detective, and that's where ACE observations are so important to me. And I shared a lot of the observations I was discovering with TTouch, but then in 2018, those detailed observations and freework, which had started to sort of evolve naturally as well, because so many dogs didn't enjoy being touched. So many dogs were harness shy or sensitive or shut down when they were on the lead. This kind of evolution of giving them way more choice in their interactions with us had been sort of evolving over 10 to 15 years, but actually it was Henry who really kind of helped structure it into a more sort of solid foundation, I guess, in 2017, I think he came to me. So freework was also not part of the TTouch approach. And then in October of 2018, because freework's so valuable, because detailed observations are so valuable, it just wasn't possible for me not to start teaching those elements for dogs that were at the farm for the first time. It offers such a lovely way for animals to settle in. So animal-centered education was born in October of 2018. And then from there, it's been sort of piecing together all the bits that I've learned over the years, the value of detailed observations, looking at these patterns, recognizing that even if a dog seems to have a disproportionate response to something, it's not disproportionate as far as that dog's nervous system is concerned. And certainly with court cases, there was one case where a dog had turned and caught a child in the face, and it was obviously a very serious situation. The dog came to me for assessment, and looking at the dog move, it was evident that the connection with his hind limbs wasn't as fluid as it could be. And I never talk about good or bad movement. What does that even mean? Good or bad behavior? What does that even mean? Movement is movement, behavior is behavior. But when it comes to movement, I look at the efficiency and the fluidity and the ease of movement, rather than whether it's good or bad. Because if we talk about fluidity, there's so much more scope. And if we go, oh, dog's got really bad movement, what does it mean? And B, it actually doesn't mention the possibility of improvement. So this dog had what I would say inefficient movement through his hind legs. And I connected with him, and we did lots of stuff at the farm, and hope he had a really nice time. And then it came to the sort of hands-on bit, because I would do a hands-on assessment once the dog had started to build a relationship with me. And I got to his lumbar spine on the left-hand side, and he was ice cold, and the hair in that area of his spine was just slightly coarser. And it was a dog at the RSPCA called Sandy 26 years ago, who was the inspiration for my interest in coat patterns. And again, that was something I shared with TTouch, because once I was aware of how much the coat changes around arousal, around injury, around changes to soft tissue, skeletal change, disease, nutrition, that took me down this sort of incredible rabbit hole that I'm still traveling down now. So this dog's coat was slightly different color. He was black, but the coat on the left-hand side of the lumbar spine was a little brown. and it was just sticking up a little. It was kind of, if you feel a healthy coat, you know, that lovely smooth, almost silky shyness, and this area felt as though he was just a little bit sticky. There was no vitality under my fingers, and the skin was icy cold. So I said to the guardian, this dog needs a veterinary assessment. And she said, we took him straight there when this awful thing happened in our garden. And I said, the dog needs to go back, because this freezing cold is a sign of, often a sign of chronic disturbance. And I really want you to get an x-ray, because I think we might need that for court case, because we were on appeal. There was already a destruction order. So they'd come to me on appeal, and I said, now I've handled your dog, I'm going to ask you what happened. And she said the child came up behind, put her hand out to pat the dog. And I said, I'm going to ask you, but I actually probably don't need to ask you, where did she pat the dog? And she said, on the left-hand side of that lower back. And the dog just whipped round, then stopped, just caught this poor child and then stopped. So she did go for x-rays, and sure enough, there were arthritic changes on the left-hand side of that lumbar spine. So of course that's a hugely important part of our case, that the dog was to stay under veterinary supervision, that the dog was to be, you know, regularly assessed for well-being, that all the normal things were put in place, obviously, to ensure safety for everyone. But we did get, you know, a successful outcome, because we could prove just from that one x-ray that the dog's response was unlikely to happen again. Not saying, we can never say never, unlikely to happen again, with pain relief, with awareness, with modification to the way the dog lived his life, and just making sure that there, you know, were lots of safeguards in place, no children under a certain age, and everything were allowed in the house. So observations save lives, in my opinion, and experience. And it's not the only time. I've had fosters too who presented as though they may have behavioural struggles, whereas in fact the behaviour responses were as a direct result of pain. And you know, many clients have gone on to discover that their dog has got underlying issues, particularly with the hindquarters and luxating patella. There are two really common ones in my experience, particularly where we've got reactivity, and sort of acing reactivity. One big part of that is to ensure that the dogs are pain-free, because my experience for every dog that's come to me who has struggles socializing with other dogs, they've all had underlying pain. Bear in mind, we can't say all dogs that are reactive have underlying pain, because people know how I work and what I look for, and that we collaborate with vets. I am more likely to see a higher proportion. But I still keep this question mark, because with horses too, all the behavior issues that a horse demonstrates, in my experience, that we've seen with horses that have come to us for rehab, I don't do that now. Again, there's been underlying discomfort. So anatomy and physiology is threaded through a lot of our ACE stuff, taught by, I teach some basic stuff. I am passionate about it, obviously, with my human background, obviously what I know too about the impact of pain, but also taught by veterinary physiotherapist Maria Johnston. And I invited her to start teaching A&P on the courses at Tilly Farm back in 2012 or 13. We're trying to remember actually when that first course was, because I do think it's really important that we have some understanding of anatomy and physiology. Plus, to me, it's really, really interesting, because it helps to answer some questions. Collaboration, hugely important part. Communication with the client, with the animal, letting the animal be a part of their own learning experiences. You know, really asking people, what signs does your dog or do your dogs give you when they are inviting body contact? And what signs do they give you when it's time to stop? That's a really almost basic question, right? But can we actually answer it? Because when a dog comes and sits next to us, it's not an invitation for touch. It's a desire for that social interaction by being close to someone in that important social group. And so many dogs get labeled as aloof or disinterested or concerned in or by human company. But actually, when we give people a new way of connecting with their animal through ACE, dogs that have avoided sitting on the sofa for 10 years suddenly join their family members. And someone put a picture up saying this may look like a really boring picture to you. And it was a picture of their dog lying on the sofa next to the partner, and the dog's head was on the partner's lap. And this person said, my dog has never done this until I started doing the dog detective course. Because what we do, what our nervous system tells us to do is when an animal sits near us, oh, start fumbling. Actually, some partners do that too. So Tony will do like repetitive thumb stroking. It's making my nervous system go a bit weird, even just thinking about it, making me itch. And that's really off-putting. It makes me want to leave, but at least I can say, darling, you're doing that really annoying thing again that you've done for 38 years. But animals can't, so they leave. Or they seem fidgety. Or maybe they'll roll over, and all the other ways of communicating that you all already know. And also for some dogs, sitting on the sofa is painful because when a person sits down, they're moving painful joints and ligaments in that dog's body. So again, with resource guarding, first thing that has to be ruled out is pain. Pain in the gut, pain in the ear, dental pain, pain in the joints, pain in soft tissue, pain in the smooth muscle of the gut. That's a really common one too. Acid reflux, really common. You know, the more I learn, the more I connect with more animals worldwide, the more it reinforces to me that when we're managing or looking at behavior and movement, because to me, you can't separate them, we actually need to consider the dog's internal environment and not the external environment. Although we're going to be looking at that too, obviously, when we're managing our expectations of the dogs that share our life, because maybe we need to modify some things in that home environment, for example. But if we ignore the external environment, or no, let's not ignore it, let's park it, and we focus on that dog's internal environment, we don't need to teach impulse control. We don't need to teach the dog to slow down on the lead. We don't need to teach the dog that it's okay to be in the company of other dogs. If we actually recognize what's going on in that internal environment, including the brain, and we reset or give the dogs the opportunity to reset, rebalance, and release, the external environment of that dog is less problematic. It's less disruptive. So that's why ACE free work to me is this extraordinary gift from animals who have said to me, I can't function on the lead, I can't have a harness, I'm too body sensitive, I don't know you, I don't feel safe, and all these incredible other conversations I've had with animals over the years, because it kept me thinking, how can we make this easier? How can we break this down? And in one of the clinics at the farm years ago, someone had a pattern of poles laid out, and I was just watching this guardian and the dog and the person teaching, weaving through this sort of pattern of poles. And every time the dog turned left, I think it was, this dog looked up at the pigeon sitting on the rafters. We have a sort of semi-open indoor arena. And this person said, it's the pigeon that's distracting the dog. And I said, can I just say, from where I am, it's not the pigeon. It's every time you ask your dog to flex left. So it's either the act of turning left, or turning left means your dog is facing me and some of the other people who are watching. So we're going to change something for you. We took the poles away. I said, don't do left turns. Really apologize for jumping in here, but I can see how we can make this easier. The people left the arena and we started to watch through a window so that we were less intimidating for this dog. Not only did the dog not look up at the pigeon once, the pigeon flew down and actually almost skimmed the top of the dog's nose, and the dog didn't turn a hair because we'd removed the difficult part, the left turn. That's where we start to really see these amazing patterns. Thinking about, was it the arousal of facing us, the intimidation of facing us, that left turn, that left flexion? What's happening as a dog's turning to the left, moving his neck, flexing through the ribs, driving forward with that left hind? And the left hind and the right hind are often very different in dogs too. And the jury's out as to why. Most dogs will load left fore and shorten right hind. Some dogs go the other way, load right fore, left hind, but the majority of quadrupeds, probably 80%, horses, cats, dogs, have that left fore, right hind pattern. And that changes the flexibility of each hind leg. So one hind leg tends to push more and one hind leg might weight bear more. So quite often when we're looking at dogs moving away from us, you see that actually one leg is slightly inwards, more maybe to the midline. So we can help improve balance because these natural anomalies and asymmetries will become more exaggerated as dogs age. But it's also really interesting to actually look at how does that dog move fluidly left or right? Because if we're entrenched with our habits and we're not so observant of the dogs, we might be asking them to move away from something that's disruptive to the nervous system in the external environment, but we might be asking them to flex in a way that then causes further internal discomfort. So again, maybe if we just stand back, watch more, do less, see what's easy, find those possibilities, find that flexibility and freedom and focus on that, we actually don't need to teach so many areas that we might tend to focus on in terms of building that dog's education. The dog can naturally, fluidly turn away, remain calm, stand on a loose line and watch, just like our friend with the pigeon. So I'm probably, hopefully you can tell, I'm hugely passionate about this. And we give a lot of free information. Now, to me, ACE is too good not to share. And I don't know why it took me quite so long to sort of come up with ACE freework as this most incredible way of connecting with dogs. I had lots of elements of it together for, like I said, probably close to 25 years actually. And obviously it's added layers to my own learning massively over the years, thanks to the collaboration with amazing people as well. But I'm going to give you sort of a bit more information as well as we go through. So the ACE observations, aren't just the coat, although that's just incredible. And again, it was this light bulb moment with this dog, Sandy. And I really love to credit, if I remember the person or the animal that inspired that learning experience for me, and I just saw it, I didn't come up with anything. I just took what I was seeing in these amazing animals. Then I think it's important that we play fair when we share. So I will always credit where I know I've got that inspiration from. So it's this dog called Sandy, and he had bitten 3 times, and 27 or whatever it was years ago, dogs bit or they didn't bite. We tended not to ask so many questions in the dog world. And when I was asking the team at the animal welfare centre where he was living, give me information about the scenario, the context, it was almost like I'd sort of asked, is this dog really a dog? They looked quite taken aback, and they actually had to really think about it because he had just bitten. And they said, oh, well, actually thinking about it, it's when he got picked up to be put in the car, when he got picked up to be put on the vet's table, and when we were grooming him. So, it's potentially a dominance issue. And I said, well, it might not be that at all. Let's look at him move. And I said, well, it's really interesting. He's quite overweight, and his gait is not very fluid. And they said, oh no, his gait isn't fluid because he's overweight. And I said, okay, let's revisit that. I'm going to ask you to look at it from a different perspective. Maybe he's overweight because of his gait. And that was something else I remember too from those Great Ormond Street months. We were there months. And it was how my friend would say, I can't believe I'm gaining so much weight when I can't even eat. And that is what stress, one of the effects of stress on the body too. So again, that was another, really interesting learning experience for me, the effect of, stress on digestion, but also the whole endocrine system. Every single part of the body is responding all the time. This unique dance is happening all the time. And sometimes that dance is messy and painful. And it's the same for our animal companions. And then I looked at this dog's hind legs and I saw this sort of line of hair going up the thigh, sort of across biceps femoris, across that right hind leg. And I said, look at the hair. Have you seen it's lying in a different direction? This dog, it looks like there's potential scar tissue here. He needs to go back to the vet. So he went back to the vet and he was x-rayed. Thank you, vet. And they discovered that at some point in his life, he'd been involved in a road traffic accident or something. Leg had been broken and a plate had been, that joint had, that leg had been pinned. And it had been in so long, he'd been astray, nobody had any history on him, and the pins were starting to come out. So can you imagine the pain for this boy, the pain, God love his soul, as he was picked up? You scoop them up around the hind legs, don't you? To be put in the car, to be put on the vet's table for his first examination. And when they saw this and we pieced it all together, and we had a second meeting after they had this new information, they said, oh yes, it was the right hind that we were grooming when he bit. So everyone fundraised for him to stay in the shelter but have hydrotherapy. He's an older boy, and I think he lived out his days there, but with really good support. So that was obviously the sort of eye-opening moment of changes to the skin, trigger changes in the coat. And obviously it was scar tissue that did it in this particular case, but that made me look at the coat. I kind of not taken it on board before. And then seeing so much detail and being able to, again, have that as part of those assessments, part of that sharing of the dog's story with me, even if we didn't actually know their history. And you know what? Your dog will never lie. The nervous system never lies. Nobody gets confused in the world of a dog's body. It's there. All that information is there in front of you. Everything you could want to know about a dog, how he's likely to learn, how he's likely to process, how he's likely to respond, how the duration of that engagement, what's possible for him, what's meaningful for him, what does he need to do to decompress. Absolutely everything you could ever want to know about a dog is right there. So like I say, I'm just the interpreter, the translator, and I'm really passionate about helping other people become translators too, because we can be so much more, I don't even want to say effective, because we're probably highly effective, and I was probably reasonably effective before I'd even added all these layers in. We can be more appropriate, I think, with our education of our animals, and we can deepen our appreciation of how we can meet their needs on a physical, emotional, and cognitive level too. So many dogs have noise sensitivity, almost wanted to say low-grade noise sensitivity, but I don't think it is low grade. I think we have an expectation of noise sensitivity being reactive to thunder, cars, fireworks, kind of loud stuff. But it's these low-level noises that happen in the home that are keeping many dogs' nervous systems wound tightly all the time. That can be like the sizzling of an onion if you like making pasta sauces. It might be just something buzzing that has become white noise to you. It might be the harness clip going on. And that can be the start of that arousal arc that people then might misinterpret as my dog loves going for a walk. The click of a camera phone. For so many dogs too, that sounds actually like a clicker. So again, you know, back in the day, as clicker training was starting to come in, people were saying, oh, clicker is so much more precise, it's so less confusing for dogs, much better than marker words, because you're going to use those marker words in other aspects of your daily life. Correct. Your dog might get confused in the early stages of learning. Correct. Especially if you've got a dog that really, really pays a lot of attention to what you're doing all the time. Like I have, again, my goodness, Cookie Dough and Henry sharpened me up no end to what I was actually cueing them to do without even being aware of it. So it's all correct about that word use, but what I recognized is actually there's lots of clicks that happen in the environment too that confuse the dog. The click of a kettle, the click of a phone, the click of a camera shutter, the click of a harness being done up, collar being done, trigger snap on a lead. And you know, earlier and earlier and earlier back in that dog's life, I think we are confusing, frustrating, limiting, all of those things just because we're not aware. And I've been there. I've had busy dogs that I've kind of reinforced for being busy by sort of shaping alternative behaviors because they were better than, you know, these youngsters hanging off my hair or the skin on my neck or the collar on my coat. But I never, well, until I realized, because then I didn't focus on that calmness and that being and just taking that breath. And I'm a naturally quite busy person as well. So again, how often are we shaping these behaviors in puppyhood and adolescence that we then kind of struggle to modify or change as that dog's moving through what I call sort of 3 different stages of adolescence? Because I actually think we need to categorize that age group into sort of 3 different sections, from 5 to 9 months, 9 to 18, and 18 to 24 months. I think, and I'm passionate about that age group too, the adolescent age group, because there really isn't that much information out there. So I really help people with their observations too, like looking at that blink rate. When does the blink rate speed up? When does the dog stop blinking? When did the dog jump because he heard a noise, a small noise? And if you're not seeing startle responses, is it that your dog is permanently tense because you don't get quite the same startle response, and unless the animal's, like, you know, jumping because the noise was sudden? So either that dog's tense potentially all the time and active all the time, or is really relaxed, and those odd little noises that happen in daily life are of no bother to him whatsoever, so you're okay. But sometimes we don't know. When we start watching, we actually realize that actually every time noise A happens, my dog does jump or leaves the room or just quietly walks away. So lots of dogs just will leave and it looks like they're really relaxed, but actually, you know, potentially there's something bothering them in their environment too. So I look at the position of the tongue as well, the dog's tail, that's part of their balance system. I've had an amazing year connecting with Avon and Somerset Police Dog Unit. They are such a progressive unit. The guy who is the head of the unit, Dennis McCoy, is just, oh my gosh, an incredible canine educator. He's a really inspiring man. And he and I have had so many amazing conversations. I've delivered seminars for police dogs around the UK, and dogs working in other areas for the Home Office as well. We've just had the most incredible time. And what's been really fascinating is watching the dogs that have been habitually handled and trained on one side, how their tongue drops to the right and how their tail always sits to the right, even when they're going straight. But of course, they can't really go straight. So when they're doing their jumping as part of their training, they're drifting to the right too. So we've been just sharing the value of free work and how free work can change these set patterns in the nervous system. And remember, right from the beginning, the nervous system learns in one experience. So we can sort of help that body reset really quickly when that dog's at liberty to choose and explore different movement patterns through free work. We had one dog who would spin to the right in the kennel, in the van, waiting when he, before he was going to go to work or come out for more learning experiences. And he was really interesting. When he was recalled back to the handler, he'd spin to the right, then jump up, and then come to the sit. And all these dogs are clicker trained and they're rewarded by toys. But what also was really clear was that all the toys were delivered at the same height, from the same hand, and in the same way each time, thus reinforcing these movement patterns. So I said, okay, let's just give this dog a chance to do free work, and we're just going to let him be the pilot of his own body. And he's going to just explore, and I'm going to just help guide him a bit if that's okay for him. But because we're all at liberty in the paddock, and we've got all the stations set up at the height that's probably more beneficial to him with variation. We don't just want to, stick the body in one posture all the time, obviously. We're just going to play and we're just going to explore. And he started to breathe. And that rib cage started to expand. He started to use his nose. Amazing dog. And the guy then took over, and the dog ran towards him, span, jumped up, went into sit. And I said, let's just change us, just play. We did probably, I don't know, no more than 5-10 minutes. And I took over again, said, let's just do this, counting, placing treats on the station. Let's help give him the experience of moving straight instead of this habitual spinning. And the guy recalled him again. And the dog, it was that beautiful moment, you will have seen it, I'm sure, many, many times, where we've not taught a specific skill. We've just started that unwinding process in the body, in the whole nervous system, central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. And the dog went up to his handler, his guardian, went to start that spin, sank back through the body, just looked at the handler and just came into a perfect sit on the left. And I was like, yes. I said, right. I said, see, he's thinking. So often dogs are reflexive. They're working on habit. They're working on patterns. We're the same. They're reacting to stimulus in that external environment. But when we ask or give them the possibility or invite them to slow down, at their own pace, the brain starts to be more aware, more considered, and less reflexive. So he went to do that habit and he stopped himself. That's why I don't ever teach impulse control. Don't need to. Just need to push that big reset button. So really interesting watching the tongue and the tail, see how that dog's going to turn, how are we reinforcing it. If we start to say, how about there's a possibility for you to move left, we can start straightening that dog from the tip of the tongue to the tip of the tail. And that emotional and physical balance is going to change. It's going to change together. And he was such a great example of that. So talking of tongues, Miss Pansy, some of you know this picture. And if you look just at her ears, when I'm teaching observations, it can be utterly overwhelming for people. I still miss stuff. I can't wait for this time next year to have another year of learning behind me, or even 6 months or a month, because I can't believe how much I still miss when I look back, or missed when I look back at photographs I've looked at multiple times over many, many years. I laugh at myself. So that's the other beauty of ACE, is the learning never stops. That's true for all aspects of canine care, isn't it? But I really hope people leave my courses and my talks with way more questions than answers, because if we have more questions, we're on the right path. So what do you see with Pansy's ears? I might say, just watch your dog's ears. Just watch your dog's ears. What we want to find is, what's the habitual pattern. What's that dog's baseline? BACE. I fit ACE into everything. What's that dog's baseline today? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but today. What's the baseline? When does that change? Where is the baseline if you look back at older photographs, if you've had your dog grace your life for several years? And this is what I call uh-oh ears. For sure, she's looking at the camera, for sure. And in a photograph, it doesn't matter. We're not looking at why, we're not trying to interpret, we're just practicing that art of observation. So I look at the space between a dog's ear. I look to see how narrow is that gap between the base of the ear on the left and the right. What's happening around the base of the ear? How are the ear shapes? If I was to take a silhouette from this picture, what differences would I see left and right? Nothing in nature is symmetrical. You're always going to have imbalance, but those asymmetries are going to become more exaggerated where there's disease, disharmony, disquiet as part of the aging process, as part of poor physical health, as a part of poor emotional well-being. And some dogs are born with this asymmetry in the ear, and possibly Pansy was. So look at the hair on her left ear, the right, as we look at it. Look at the angle of those ear flaps. One's pointing to the side of the screen. Her left ear is pointing down. What follows? What's the track and trace going to give us if we start to follow these structures down her face? I won't go into everything, but look at the eyes. Left eye looks a little narrower, a little bit more of a maybe almond shape potentially across the top, rounder perhaps on the right, more set back on the right. The eye looks more marble-like on the right in terms of you can see more of that actual eyeball than on that left. Could be a trick of the light, but it doesn't matter at the moment because it is about getting your eye in. Then look at her muzzle. Are the nostrils of the dog the same? We have an amazing kid, Neo, that you may know from some of the courses or from ACE Connections. And he shares his life with this really leggy, brindle boxer called Toothless. And when Neo was on one of my courses, we were watching video of Toothless, and he's so long in the neck, so long in the leg, and quite short in the neck. And his nose is set quite far back, that it wasn't possible for this dog to pick up scent. And what we also saw was his left nostril was like a line instead of a rounded, shape, or sort of shaped like a comma, isn't it? And he's never scented. He was very sensitive to dogs, never air sensed. And I said, but look, he can't scent. To access anything on the ground, he had to like hyperextend his neck and sort of contort his body so his nose could get to the ground. So his amazing guardian, who's 10, I think. I've known Neo's mum since Neo was a baby, but I think it must be 10 years now. So Neo went and got lots of scent bags that he hung on a frame he sent his mother off to buy from the garden centre, so that all this scent was at Toothless's height. And this whole world opened up for Toothless. And they got him pain relief. And they got him some Bowen therapy. And guess what? He's not really dog reactive anymore. He's not sensitive to the sight of other dogs. He can just stand and watch them, or sit in the car and watch them. And now he's learned to organize this frame. He can actually pick things up from the ground. So it isn't that we need to avoid everything all the time, but instead of saying, my dog doesn't enjoy scenting, ask, maybe my dog can't scent. Why? And also, in my experience, pain and discomfort and body tension, even if it's tension from really fun activities like writing, I love driving, but I get tension in my neck and shoulders as a result. Plus, I gesticulate a lot, as you will have already observed. it can actually block the sense of smell in humans. If you hold something with a strong smell, pencil might do it, when you're relaxed, you can breathe in all the lovely layers, all the top notes, the middle notes, the bass notes. But then if you really crunch up your neck and shoulders, the sense of smell will be inhibited to a degree, and in some cases will disappear altogether. So when a dog isn't scenting, it's not just that he might not be emotionally feeling as if he might not be feeling emotionally safe enough to scent. It might be that he physically can't do it because the world of scent is just not an option for him at the moment for lots of different physical reasons. So again, it's this, look at the nose. What are the nostrils doing in the dog? Look at the whiskers too. When dogs become tense in the structures of the face, there's over 100 muscles in a dog's head. The whiskers will rise. Sometimes you'll get one specific whisker that rises when that arousal arc starts. And I think, what does this mean for muzzle training for some dogs? And this is where I come back to, is reward-based training always rewarding for the dog? And the answer, in my opinion, is no. We create conflict with reward-based training. I've done it. I've created conflict without meaning to. I've created conflict because the dog wanted the food, wanted that engagement, but actually didn't have any choice because there was no other food available. So I didn't think about it. So when the dog's struggling with muzzle training, we need to look at the physical aspect. What's happening when that dog's arousal levels start? Those whiskers are rising. That is going to make that muzzle feel very different to when that dog's relaxed and the whiskers are soft and down. So look at whisker patterns. If it's safe to do it in photographs. Obviously, don't intimidate a dog by getting too close unless he's just hanging out calmly by your side. So instead of touching and stroking your dog, unless he's given you the cue for that engagement, start really admiring all the details and that breath and that rate of respiration. And how does your dog use his body when he's dreaming and going into that REM sleep? So yeah, the nostrils, the whiskers, the breath, but also look at the shape of your dog's face, because a dog and the length of the dog's neck is also really interesting to start observing, because as dogs relax, and if we've missed it, and I have to say it's been a long time since I saw a dog that didn't have some physical discomfort, bear in mind, lots of people come to me for the reasons that I've already explained. So I am going to see a high proportion of dogs with physical discomfort. Their whole dog's face starts to almost melt. Those ears soften. That space between the base of the ears gets wider. The ear flaps start to open. People say, oh, my dog's ears are always folded. Why? That's not normal. In some breeds, you might see that they fold when they're aroused, worried, and remember, arousal can be triggered by pleasant and difficult experiences. Why? What we're looking for is this opening of these ear flaps so that there is way more movement through the whole ear rather than maybe just one, or maybe sort of only through the half ear that you can see because it's permanently folded in half. It's actually quite frightening how much a dog's body literally melts when they're pain-free, potentially for the first time in a long time. And I do think we miss signs of pain in a high proportion of animals, full stop. So in ACE, I really encourage our students to consider whether the dog has a busy brain or body pain, or both. And obviously some dogs are busier, that's in their DNA. They have that personality that's been bred into them to find huge rewards in being active, but they still should be able to switch off and fully relax and not just drop to the floor because they're exhausted, because exhaustion and fatigue is not the same as calm and content. So again, I'm looking at what's happening when a dog's dreaming. This is the most amazing experience. My daughter captured it on film with Henry. What parts of the body are moving in that REM sleep? And Henry one of my amazing canine tutors and companions, his right ear is way more mobile than it used to be. It was pretty immobile when he first came to me. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And couldn't touch it for 3.5 weeks. And now I think he was probably born with something going on in the neck. We know he's got some joint issues. We've already had x-rays when he was younger, and we're going to go back in and have more done next time he's due to go in for checkups. But in his sleep, when he's dreaming and he goes into really deep sleeps, it's lovely, his left ear twitches way more than the right. The right does twitch, but there is less movement. His legs are going, and I've seen some dogs whose paws only flicker because they've got hip issues, so the legs don't twitch in sleep. So it's a really useful way of observing our animals' movement while they're actually stationary. And if you don't ever see your dog dream, ? Why? Because dogs should go into REM sleep just like people. They should also go into deep relaxation, which is not the same as sleeping. Deep relaxation is that lovely, they can snore in deep relaxation, that breathing can just become really heavy. Not snoring because they've got breathing issues, I don't mean that. They want to see dogs struggling obviously to breathe while he's sleeping. But watch that lovely sort of bellows, like where the respiration really slows down, 8 breaths per minute maybe for even a small to medium dog. And then you get up and go and they're like, coming with you. It's that lovely deep relaxation, but they're still fully aware. So I want dogs to go through all of that, and deep relaxation is really important. And again, that's something that naturally follows. And after sort of free work, and when Toothless, that box with the long legs and the flat face, had his first scent experience that he could actually reach, he slept for 2 hours afterwards, which is amazing. So Pansy's tongue, can you see how much more is sticking out on the left side of her mouth? More canine tooth covered by the tongue on the left than the right. And then how might that correspond and correlate to the musculature in her neck? See, she's not quite straight on the right. This massive bulge on the left. Yes, she's sitting crookedly. So that's obviously going to be playing a part. But again, why? Why is she sitting crookedly? Why is she sitting on one hip? And dogs will have they have a variety of sit positions. But if you're looking at slouchy, couchy sit versus ready and waiting sit, you're going to see a huge disparity. So Henry's slouchy, couchy sit is like a little old man. He's got his back legs forward, front legs in between, rounded back, and he'll be sitting, watching me doing whatever I'm doing. Not normally eating, he's just quietly waiting for me to go out to the kitchen and give him a little bit of good boy toast or whatever it is. But if he's sitting waiting in the kitchen while we're cooking and he wants to be part of that engagement, or he's sitting waiting for his meal, his sit is really tidy. So his back legs are pretty parallel, his front legs are in between. He's got this nice gentle arc, not this slouch. And that's amazing because he has probably got patella issues. He's definitely got bilateral hip dysplasia. And I keep an eye on that ready and waiting sit as well as the slouchy couchy sit, because if a dog can't do a neat ready and waiting sit, Houston, we've got a problem. And I do think there's great value in being aware of how dogs organize their body and sit from a really early age, and actually really helping them develop that skill, because it's a skill. And if they can't, finding out earlier rather than later. So I have another amazing person who's going back through old photographs, recognized that her puppy's right hind was always just planted out to the side in every single picture. So look at several pictures. Don't just take one moment in time and sort of build a story around that. Every single picture, right hind out to the side. She came to the farm recently and I said, she's really not fluid and efficient in that right hind. You can see that she's actually favoring it i.e. treating it sensitively or carefully, so taking her weight off it. And there are times where the hip's not coming, flexing through properly, so she's kind of guarding and slightly crabbing. And she did then take her to the vet, and there's a tiny bone chip. They don't even know where it's from. They don't know why it's there, that's in that knee joint. So she's obviously going to have surgery. And she's still young, thankfully, because her guardian's amazing. But those patterns are there, and lots of puppies that struggle as adolescent dogs, in my experience, those struggles were overlooked because the puppy and what a puppy needs from his environment and his social group are totally different from the needs of an adolescent dog. So again, we can kind of miss it because that puppy's natural need to engage can cover up lots of struggles, and the puppy might seem to be lively and really mouthy, and so we might do more robust games, and then we increase the arousal arc, and then the puppy gets even more mouthy because we're actually frightening the puppy, but we're also programming that nervous system to be in that state of arousal all the time, because every experience is being banked by this incredible brain and this incredible body. And if we help that puppy slow down and take those breaths, and we adopt a hands-free approach, and we let the puppy play with toys instead of us keeping games going for longer than the puppy might actually enjoy, we can pick up more things more quickly, recognize when we when we need to shrink the world of those dogs, and prepare these dogs for that massive adolescent shift that happens almost overnight, bang on that 5-month mark. So I have a big thing as well about adolescent dogs becoming sensitive to body contact. And it happens almost overnight at 5 months for a high proportion of dogs. And, you know, there's lots of reasons: growth plates closing, long bones of the hind leg growing faster than the long bones in the front leg, so the balance is changing. That changes the diaphragm, influences the vagus nerve, that impacts on digestion. Acid reflux, really common in adolescents. You know, lots of physical reasons, but also biological reasons too. Like if an adolescent of any species really enjoyed and had all his or her needs met through body contact, where would be the incentive to leave that social group, leave mother, leave siblings? Well, there wouldn't be any. It'd be like, oh no, you're all right. I just want to go home and cuddle on the sofa. There has to be a biological repulsion almost to body contact to encourage that being to leave that nest, that den, that area of pasture, and to start having interactions with, you know, other members of their species, so they can create new families, discover, explore, take over new territories. But quite often as well, the handling that we need to you know, do and help our dogs learn is okay. That handling has also been potentially slightly poisoned through overhandling during puppyhood, but the puppy's needs are different, the biological needs are different then, so we might not recognize it quite as much. So the neck, terrifying. If we actually start cataloging our dog's neck, pre-pain relief, post-pain relief, quite alarming. And that's what I warn all my students too, that with more knowledge comes more guilt, but that does, you know, it's an inevitable part that as we know more, we do look back and go, oh my God, I'm so sorry I missed it. And you are going to make mistakes, and I call them mistakes, because we've missed something, not because we've done anything deliberately. We just didn't know, we didn't see, we weren't aware, or maybe we had observed but we hadn't quite joined up all the dots. So look at the picture of this dog's neck, and then the angle of his shoulder blade, scapula, and then his elbow. And then the position of the tail, his hindquarters, and it's almost a straightish line along his top line. He's kind of looks like to me that he's kind of sucking back and kind of looks quite labored in his movement. So he looks like he might fatigue a bit more quickly than a dog that's sort of really, truly, effortlessly and athletically covering the ground. He kind of looks a bit shrunken. And I want to kind of help him sort of elongate and lengthen that frame. So compare him, remember him, to this dog, his friend. Can you see that neck telescoping out? That top line just doesn't look quite as wooden. You can see that sort of elongation through the muscles of the back. The angle of the scapula is further forward. He's not just flexing from the elbow. If you look at the length of stride, that toe will go just past the nose. So you see how much shorter this stride is because of the concertina ring in the neck compared to that. This dog's pushing from behind, tails up. This dog looks like he's kind of, kind of almost pulling himself along. And I'm sure you will not be surprised to learn, and some of you know this maybe already, that the black and white dog is the dog who found body contact really difficult and who has the bite history on body contact versus this one. Because this dog is in need of veterinary input and pain relief, in my humble opinion. Another amazing thing I discovered, thanks to incredible dogs, was the correlation between the ear position and what was going on with the hind legs. And that will be linked to compensation patterns as a result of the dog pulling himself along with the forequarters because he can't push from behind. And there'll be lots of reasons why that happens. Sometimes those patterns are reinforced by us. They can be reinforced through adolescence when that hind leg's longer and the dog's naturally tipping downhill. But this extreme change in the position of the ear would immediately raise a question for me that this dog potentially has got some neurological issue, some issue maybe with the hind quarter, such as like hip dysplasia, luxating patella, because this may be a common sight, but it is abnormal in dogs. They shouldn't present like this, but so many do. And you can see that the structures of the face quite, tight, darling dog, gorgeous looking, but look at that area, that base. Sarah Whiffen and I call it the area. I find it hilarious. Look at that area between the ears, how much narrower it is than if those ears were soft and hanging from a little bit further down the side of the dog's face. And the coat. This is one of my all-time favorite pictures.
Just a second, Sarah. Is 17 past 8.
Thank you. So that I'll skip through some of the next slides. I've covered a lot, and I'll just show some videos of free work. So the coat, look at the square in the middle of that dog's back. It's almost a perfect square of raised hair. And on veterinary examination, this dog actually did have the start of spondylosis. So these changes would be gradual. If they're sudden, get straight to the vet. If you suddenly become aware of them, when you compare to old videos or photographs, still need to go to the vet. But they probably have happened over many months, so you might not be aware of the significance, but it normally is a sign of tension or changes or damage to soft tissue or changes in the skeleton. And the same if you start to recognize that your dog maybe has runny eyes or a runny eye, that often will then link to what's going on with the structures from the ear down the neck into that front limb. Can be a compensation pattern because of something that's going on behind. And this is one of those really stupid things that I just saw it in Henry, knew about the connection with tight facial structures and gunky eyes in horses, had never put the two together. And it's Henry's right eye that gets a little bit more room, less now, his ears are more mobile. So what part do we play? Well, like I say, we reinforce through habitual delivery of rewards, treats or toys, leads that are too short, and also by not addressing potential issues with the hind limb, like this poor German Shepherd. You can see that this dog's overdeveloping through the forequarters. The coat's much coarser through the whole of that neck and shoulder because of what's happening with the underlying structures, because there's such weakness behind. Let's move on to some videos. So Cookie Dough, she was the one that started elements of free work, bringing it together with things like the ball pool 14 years ago, because she was so overwhelmed by everything in the human world that noise and contact just kept her in this state of arousal. And I did make the mistake, I did fall into the trap of teaching her lots of active stuff, which was better than her being attached to my neck. But I realized, I was like, whoa, hang on, I'm reinforcing her busyness. I've just kind of shifted it. I haven't helped her take that breath and start to soften and melt. So she was one that started the ball pit because it gave her control of noise. And it also gave her an outlet for her arousal. I mean, look at her ears, see how tight they are again? Without needing to just dig in the garden, she could dig and move, but it would be more rewarding for her than getting into a pattern where she would just be overworking her shoulders, creating even more tension in an already tense little body. And it was Cookie Dough that saved Henry's life. And you can see again that right ear is at a different position to the left. He is looking towards me, and now his ears are much more out to the side. But when I watch a dog's ears, I say, oh, here we go. And you see it with young dogs. Lots of people message me going, oh, my adolescent dog gets really excited and starts grabbing me. It's not just adolescent dogs, but it's nearly always adolescent. And I said, watch the ears. You're going on, you know, for too long. And it's not about withholding or turning your back or shoving the dog away. It's about timing and observing. So engage with your dog, and when you see what I call the uh-oh ears happening and the pupil will start to widen, the sympathetic nervous system is engaged, we need to take that breath. I said, so scatter some treats, start looking towards the station that you might have, such as a bench in the garden or a seat in the living room. Just start floating around so your dog can start decompressing. You're not going to withhold, we're not going to cut off the fun, but we're going to let the parasympathetic nervous system re-engage. And people have emailed saying, I cannot believe how effective that is. Thank you so much. And it is, it's about, again, that awareness and taking that breath and changing. And that is what Henry really reinforced for me. I won't show you those. Let me show you. Oh, these are Henry's ears now. Can you see how much wider they are? So they're his relaxed ears. And this is the free work that he sort of brought together by encouraging more efficient movement patterns, introducing a variety of tactile things that he could touch with those whiskers and his nose and his tongue and his paws, because I couldn't touch him when he first came to me on foster. Same with Cookie Dough. They both came at 5 months. And his lovely guardians were really out of their depth, but their brilliant behaviourist asked in a group, and a mutual friend said, you've got to get this dog to Sarah. I saw Cookie Dough's intake video when she was a puppy at Battersea. I know her as an adult dog. I know, you know, how Sarah helped her, and Henry sounds exactly the same. Similar breeding, English Bull Terrier, blend, similar colour, and very similar behaviours. So he bounced his way through the gates at Tilly Farm for 2 weeks to give his darling guardians a break. And we just started the process of hands off, but encouraging him to walk towards stations. He kind of started to offer that. I already had really enriched training areas and scent areas set up for dogs that were visiting, or my own dogs. But again, making sure it was meaningful for the dog. So Cookie Dough with one snuffle mat, death rat shake, cast aside. Really boring, really boring. Smart dog, thank you, dull, dull, dull. Flick it to one side. That's what I'm bred to do. Done. I was like, oh my God, I'm just missing the other passion of a terrier is to push their head into things. So I got a friend to make a bank of snuffle mats out of thin ones for me, so I could stack them. And she would spend ages going top one, pushing her head into the second one, pushing her head in. She never took them off and cast them aside, because it was meeting that terrier reward of pushing head into something. And so again, it's about shaping these, enriching engagements to meet that dog's needs based on what you observe, or maybe what you already know about breed type. So look at the difference in Henry's posture as he's engaging with stuff, licking on a big silicone mat. He used to use those long before licky mats were available. And one thing with licky mats, watch how your dog, if you use them, engages with them. Because what I've seen a lot of, I think they're brilliant, amazing addition to our dogs' lives. But if you use thickish food in the squares, far from the dog licking, they start to gnaw, and they do often all move in a similar frame, where they almost come in like an almost jerky way with their lips curled back to bite and bite. And if you take your eye off the front end and watch that middle part of your dog's body, you've got a really important spinal segment there called T13L1. It's at the back of the rib cage. And lots of dogs overwork that junction. That's where that square of hair is sticking up on that collie in that picture. When they're biting on the licky mat, they're arching, and they're working those abdominal muscles over and over again. And things like that can lead to more harness sensitivity and more body sensitivity. Lots of athletic dogs that naturally jump are really sensitive to harnesses, because that forward movement, and dogs that pull, that forward movement is overworking latissimus dorsi, pectoral muscles, and the trapezius muscles too. So again, what activities we're engaging in with our dogs can be the reasons why we then might need to really work to desensitize our dogs to some equipment, for example. So look at the different, that's T11, a little bit there. And so I have to be careful that Henry doesn't overwork T13L1. He's very straight through the stifle, as you can see. He's got appalling conformation, but a brilliant brain. But look, as his neck curves to the left, his tail comes to the left. So we can set up different ways for these dogs to actually start exploring a greater range of movement than if we're only delivering food rewards when they're maybe working on one side. I've seen this with so many dogs, and I get to work with amazing groups of dogs, assistance dogs, doing a whole program for another group of assistance dogs shortly, police dogs. If the treat or the food or the toy reward are coming from the same hand, same height, same position, every time you want to reinforce that behavior, you're actually reinforcing crookedness. That's what you're training. So look at what's happening now with Henry's body with the stuff on the floor, but look at what's happening with his elbow and how that might not be possible for a dog that has elbow dysplasia, for example. And really early on, people would come for one-to-ones, I'd have things for the dog to do in the barn, because what I discovered was, A, the dog needs to explore the environment, obviously, but also people, if they're holding onto that dog's lead, tend to do what I call displacement fumbling. They'll reach down and fumble, and they don't even know they're doing it. So even if you say, could you take your hand off your dog? Oh yeah, sorry. And then you ask them a question, they fumble. So it's much better for the dog to be completely free around the room. Plus, obviously, my passion is movement and observations and looking at how a dog organizes his body. So I wanted to have things that encourage the dog, engage that seeking system to move around the room. But people say, oh, my dog doesn't like snuffle mats, or because they were new, obviously, as well at some point. Well, my dog doesn't like, I had the Nina Austin games, the original wooden ones. Well, doesn't like doing things like that. Well, their dogs loved doing that when I raised them up. It's that they couldn't access them when they were on the floor. And again, that whole concept of my dog loves to carry a toy, question mark, or does he need to? And again, in free work, we might have the ball pit, but we might have here a toy that has been of huge interest to a dog. I always ask people to put a toy, at least 2 water bowls in, and then we start with 5 different stations, sometimes 4, for some dogs even 3, just to see how that dog enjoys engaging and what he does with his body at each station. And we've had dogs that have been ball obsessed because the dog loves the ball. And so let's say, for example, this pink ball that's come out of this ball pit is actually the dog's tennis ball. We've had that available to them because we want to know at what point does the dog need to go and engage or decompress or take time out, like when you've been writing a report and you just need to run around the garden or watch your guilty pleasure rubbish TV for a minute just to reset your brain. We've had dogs that ignored their ball that they were obsessed with until there was a noise in the environment, and then they would run and grab the ball and then spit it out again. So their guardian started to recognize that actually their dog didn't love a ball, the dog needed a ball, and the dog was being taken into environments that were actually overwhelming for the dog. So the dog had to carry a ball all the time. And that's where they'd got their belief that their dog loved a ball. And we had another dog recently in free work, and the guardian saying, I can't believe my dog's been obsessed with balls for like 4 years. It's the one final thing we can't seem to help him with. And the dog's ignored the balls until she went to touch him, and then he had to run and grab a ball. And I said, put your hand down. And he spat out the ball and went back to investigating the free work. She put the hand out again as he came past, run and grab a ball. And she said, oh my gosh, she now knows that he's got pain, and she'd already addressed it by the time she came to the workshop, because we do a mixture of online and practical. And she'd already had an assessment and got him on pain relief. She said, do you think that's where the ball obsession started? Because I didn't realize he was in pain. I said, could be. It's certainly his coping mechanism. He has to have something in his mouth when you want to touch him. So we get to kind of re-question everything. And it's really important that we set the stations at a height that is easy for the dogs to access. So this is our lovely Pansy. And this is this gorgeous older boy who really wanted to, hold stuff in his mouth, particularly balls as well, and really enjoyed engaging with the snuffle mat. So actually had, more to engage with, because things were then placed at a height that was suitable for him, because this boy had arthritis in the carpal joints. So again, imagine that as you're bending down, your whole world shrinking. Same for the lovely boxer, Toothless, just because his legs were so long. And we'll start with whatever the dog finds easy and rewarding. So this is Hendrix. And where he was in the shelter, they do free work all the time. So he came on foster, was a little bit worried by lots of things. He was a COVID puppy, but he really enjoyed the pickpocket floor forager. But if he touched anything with a paw that made a noise, he'd panic, and then that would poison that whole area. Anything new, like a shadow on a wall, really worried him. So we just started with the familiar. And so we started with 3 stations for him, his pickpocket floor forager. I think we had 2 actually, and then another mat, and then a snuffle mat that was raised for him. But he actually couldn't eat. He couldn't eat from the bowl. He had scabs on his nose where he'd been burying his food in the shelter. And long story short, immediate red flag for me about digestive issues. So we changed lots of things very quickly. And he also came with a history of grabbing like Henry. And like Henry, the minute we sorted the gut out, both of these dogs had omeprazole for 10 days prescribed by my brilliant vet. The behaviour overnight changed dramatically. It was like we'd flipped a switch. So excess mouthing, don't think it's just a young thing. Think it's a young thing because that youngster is overwhelmed, digestive upset, potential acid reflux. It's a way of coping. It's that need as well to connect and maybe have resistance on a sleeve, because that dog has got physical discomfort, and maybe that pulling actually helps to stretch that gut out, because I see this really strong pattern with dogs with digestive acid reflux, needing to pull. And what we did with Hendrix was make sure that in his environment, whether he was in the office with me or we were over in the room or the arena, we had what I call BAD toy, for belching and discomfort, BAD. So it was a really heavy toy, so he could have that resistance himself while the omeprazole was starting to do its job, rather than my arm. So again, it's about sort of shaping that dog's needs. So these are just some of the stations that we use. Raised platforms too. So many guardians discovering free work that their dogs really enjoy just hanging out on raised platforms. And looking at postural patterns as well. How is that dog organizing his body? And what's happening with the coat? How might that relate to what we're seeing in movement around the 3, 4, or 5 stations we might have set up? So look at this amazing coat, down on the right and straight out, and more compartmentalized in greater sections on the left. And this little guy could only lick on one side of his mouth. So what we did was make sure that actually he had lots of choices for licking stations. And the one that he kept going back to was one that had lines on it that helped him move his tongue in a straight line. Big question mark around knees. So we'll look again at what is rewarding for the dog, what is reinforcing that the dog's picking for himself, and how can we extend those experiences. So the tongue is key to so much, gives you so much information, and yet we don't actually think about using or reinforcing it as part of our rewarding education. We might recognize the value of licky mats, but are we truly shaping, you know, our layouts in terms of free work, even if you're only using it as an enriching experience on its own, which of course it is in its own right? Are we actually paying attention of how we influence that tongue for better or for worse through delivery of rewards, what we're making available, the type of rewards we're making available? So 3 stations for Mini Winnie was literally 3 mats, one of which actually was her bed. She was so fearful. But for bigger dogs, it might be 3 actual stools. I'm just going to show you a clip of how we would start with 3 stations. This lovely Ridgeback has had quite a few health issues, and he could never eat when he was away from home. He could get aroused really quickly too. He is like a giant version of Henry. So we just had 3 stools out for him. You can see he's looking to leave. So if he needs to leave, guess what? He's going to leave. But there was food on each station, and he suddenly found it. And he ate for the first time away from home. His guardian Matt's doing an amazing job of just going with him and just not interrupting the movement. He needed to be on the line because they weren't sure about letting him off. Obviously in a new environment, I'd feel the same. So he's coming up to me and he's going to air scent. Then that is not an invitation for me to touch him, as I'm sure you know. He needs to just pick up that scent data from me as he comes past me. Yep, got you. Yeah. It's not an invitation for me to lean over the fence and muffle his gorgeous ears. We rush dogs, we don't let them learn at their own pace. Coming back again, little, yep, got your number, might want a first date with you. Let me just air scent past everybody else sitting there. And I love this, just giving him time to process that environment. Think how many open active slots are there for him to process new information, and how those are filled with new scent, sight, sound. So you can see he's just starting that arousal up. So it's just like, let's come back in. Let's just load those 3 stations for him again. Let's help him reset. So he doesn't need to redirect. We need to be able to say, okay, we need to give you support here. Let you find it for yourself. No, let's step in, help you reset. Let's remind you of the possibilities.
You can see a rib back, that's perfect. Your first observation. Think about just looking at his back and what shape his back makes at the different stations. Just look at one body part. It's so much easier if we're not trying to data gather.
And then he can go back.
Or you might be drawn to watching how his ears change position. Well worth just focusing on one part. This is lovely.
So you can see how quickly he reset from that start of jumping up at mat again. Went back and sniffed the ground again.
What
like
I
great.
see is like flexion in T13L1, the middle of that back. But that actually, there's movement in that body part.
I just, yeah, switch off the camera at that point. But really interesting too that he then goes and drinks. So he has water in the van. But again, it's that reset where dogs are in a new environment. They need to drink, and we often don't take it with them. I'm hugely passionate about taking water when we're out walking with dogs, not just in the summer, particularly if dogs are easily aroused for whatever reason when out, excitement or anxiety. Again, particularly dogs that are sensitive to the sight of other dogs, they need water. And again, it's just something that we don't really think about. But having water in the free work and water in the arena when our horses are in there too is really illuminating, not just how a dog drinks, but when a dog drinks. So we build the free work layers. I won't show Pansy, so that we can help improve the movement through the back. You can see Pansy is dropped through the upper part of the thoracic spine and then roaches from that T13L1 in week 1 with her legs underneath her, but how the arc is more from the back of the shoulders right to the base of the tail in week 2. Can you see the difference there? And this is what we're looking for, this freedom of movement, not this sort of drop down and sort of overwork often quite specific parts of the body. So this is Jonty again, second session, I think. Or maybe it was his third, I can't remember. So we do like a session in the morning, session in the afternoon, not long, no more than 20 minutes, some dogs 10 minutes. I think Jonty was probably even less. So we had this floor forager because he can become quite aroused around soft things. And for the first time, he's on a long line as well. So I said, let's give him a longer line. We can recover. We can help him. We're getting to understand what's meaningful for him. And it's what I call the drop game, where we start adding layers into free work.
That's what he's looking for. So, yep.
But teaching the guardian to say drop as a cue for the dog to move towards them. And this was the first time he'd been not only on a long line, but handled by his other guardian Tam away from home. And you can see we don't need the van in the arena anymore. And he's starting to look towards those stations already. This is, I think it might have been the next morning, I can't remember, but it's the same session. I mean, the same workshop. So he's picked it up. So what, who cares?
Yeah, and you could see that was happening. That's why I said give him another treat in there.
So again, it's just having the confidence to know we can just wait, we can do something. The dog's already learning the value of the stations. We start to add more learning layers within, you know, hopefully what's become a rewarding foundation and framework for dogs.
So what you could do is have a look with him, Tam, like drop some more on. So if he's getting a bit of frustration, just drop, don't pick it up, just drop some stuff on.
See his posture change when he
Drop
thinks she's going to
stuff
pick
on
it
that.
up.
Just don't make a move to take it.
So obviously if he,
Add to it.
his behaviour was a bit more
Add more time.
obvious,
Like,
a bit more,
we could do this together.
if he was more protective, I wouldn't have her approach, but it's just like, just carry on, just add.
Yeah.
Tam's very, very skilled.
And then just throw more
Just
down.
add more.
Good boy. Now come to this red one.
And the beauty of a
Don't
long
think about
line
him,
means that she
put
just,
stuff down. See, you can always go back to him.
not ignore the dog in a horrible way, just say, look, why don't we just look at this really lovely red stool over here?
But don't try and have an agenda to moving him off that.
You can have that. I'm going to find joy over here.
Yeah, keep going, Tam. Yes.
Yes. How beautiful is that?
Yeah.
At this point, Matt, his other guardian, is crying. I think I'm starting to get emotional.
You know what word I would start teaching him is drop. But the way you're going to do it is you're going to say drop every time you put a piece of food down. Okay? So you're going to use drop like you're going to use one. So drop just means something, not, it doesn't have to put anything, take anything out of his mouth. Just drop means piece of food's available. Drop.
And the fact that he was still eating away from home on a long line for the first time isn't jumping up at Tam. He already looks more settled and mature, doesn't he? To me, anyway.
Drop food. Drop
And the fact that Tam
dropping
wanted to connect with him in front of us.
Yeah.
It's just, it's music to my ears to hear this really quiet engagement. It's food for the soul, isn't it? And he's not looking to leave. He's not jumping up. He's not overwhelmed. And again, we keep the session short. We don't go on for much longer.
Yeah. And if he needs to leave, he needs to leave. Because if he needs to do something different and we don't give him that outlet, we are increasing the likelihood of him needing to grab that and rag it again.
Or the person's sleeves, Nice. So for some dogs as well, like licking's obviously hugely calming, but some dogs can't lick. So again, we get creative. We have things on an angle and just maybe a tiny bit of flavored water rather than actual paste. So it's really quick, easy access for them.
Oh my goodness, it's amazing. Sounds beautiful. Lovely.
And look how he's mirroring her. We teach loose lead walking without the lead in free work or on a long line like this. And again, like, oh, well, of course, you need to do that. Decompress. There's nothing wrong with that.
Say drop. Do another one. Doesn't matter if he doesn't see it. Right.
And this time he doesn't need to go, oh, because she's not so close. Yeah. He's already learning. Well, there's no attachment to outcome. There's no agenda. I win more stuff here.
And then think about going to another station to do a drop. Let the line out a bit. Yeah. We can recover anything pretty well.
Oh, look at that. I've watched this several times. I show it a lot because I just think it's just beautiful.
And I would finish.
And so we did. And then have I got time just to show a couple more videos for you? So this is Hendrix. So we started building around 2 of these, like I said. And when he first arrived at the farm, because we set up free work when he came in, he was like, oh, there's something I know, because he'd had experience of that in kennels. So it was still enjoyable for him. He'd sniff the food, he just couldn't eat it, God love his soul. But we could also add more scent items too that weren't going to overwhelm him. So stuff like donkey straw and hay, and then horse rugs and stuff like that, get really creative. And I create what we call a country walk. So this is full of bean bags, so we call it the Forest of Bean. The whole county is called Worcestershire, and there is a place called Licky End in Worcestershire, so we can have one of those as well. So it just helps people create more engagement at home or in the garden, because if you think about the majority of dogs, they are either kind of dormant at home or they're going out for exercise. The garden, unless you have a really lovely garden where lots of wildlife come like we do, it's kind of like, yeah, done it, a bit familiar now. So free work enables us to kind of keep that connection and hang out and be with each other doing a country walk at home. So great for bad weather, too hot, too snowy, too wet, dogs that lack confidence, dogs that are on restricted exercise for health reasons, but also just as an enriching engagement during the day. And you don't need that much, but this is an example of one of the angled stations. So I have a snuffle tray. It's filled with pocket snuffle mats, again for those smaller dogs like Cookie Dough that really wanted to burrow into stuff, and I'd have literally a whole pile of them on the floor, like a pile of leaves. And actually it was so beneficial for so many dogs, they really enjoy them, that a snuffle tray has become a really fun part of ACE free work.
And then imagine that elastic bungee between you, so you don't want to overstretch it, and you want to start then inviting him to engage with you. So briefly you become the pilot and he becomes your co-pilot. So you're going to go with him first, so that you're like, yeah, this is great, you're making great choices. You just watch as well, getting the treat ready, because otherwise that starts to change the engagement, because the dog's got an expectation. So yeah, just go with him again, so that he knows he's making superb choices and that you're really interested in his choices. You know, so much of it is human-led when we engage with dogs, and we want him to have the opportunity to lead that country walk as well. Lovely, just wait.
No, listen to his nose, I love that.
So now you could just, go to the Forest of Bean and add a treat there for him. So you're saying, I can make good choices too.
So it's this lovely shift of meeting the dog and letting the dog guide the session, and then inviting, well, how about I pick a station too? And we start this really nice dance, and then, but wait for them too. We don't want this, oh, we're on alert, right, I'm twisting through the body looking up at you in order to get a piece of food. It's like the dog's free.
His nose, he's got different textures around his muzzle.
But we're starting to help teach that dog to move straight as well, move in balance toward stations, and that's hugely beneficial for dogs in rescue.
Where you want to go, so you start to give him visual information. Yes.
There, because Mads looked where she wanted to go, he turned and went with her. Again, often we're like this.
They start to move out of balance. Lovely.
And the dog's like, what? I'm doing what you're telling me to do with your body.
To move towards something with you, not tip out of balance and walk next to you. Really nice. And then let him just go back to exploratory again in a minute. Give him the cue for direct engagements at an end.
So we start to build this beautiful dance where the dog and the guardian are moving fluidly, and then this quiet go back to explore. Because if you think of free work in 4 elements, it's explore, then this engagement, evaluate what you're seeing, and then the engagement, and then deciding where you'd like to take that dog's education. So to me, that is a great example of rewarding education as opposed to reward-based training. We then can spread the stations apart, start adding in proprioceptive tracks, walk over hoops or ramps as well, depending on what you're seeing around those original exploratory sessions, but with the aim of always starting with the option to explore, having lots of exploratory sessions in between, and always finishing with exploratory as well, and just building the layers for car travel, because that was another big fear of Hendrix's. So I put that in ACE Connections, again, round his floor forager, tracks. And from a dog that if he touched something, the whole area was poisoned if he got a spook, to a dog that was then seeking out the sound of his feet on tracks. We had the car ramp as part of a proprioceptive track, then going up to a chair before we even brought it near the car. And again, all free. Then we do obviously go through the steps while we're carrying a harness. And then when the harness or collar is reintroduced to the dog, and ultimately back to a line, like we saw with Johnsy, but he had to start on a line. Because I'm looking for that same rhythm, that same fluidity, that same beautiful swing through the body, that same balanced movement that we achieved when the dog was free, when that dog's now back on a line. And if at any point that changes, we've gone too far. We've started that arousal arc. We've done something with our body posture that we need to change. There's always a reason. So we're always looking to go, hang on, let's rethink. And this darling Daisy, on her first day, when her guardian picked up the harness, she ran under the seat of a complete stranger and hid between her legs. So I said, let's not have the harness for 2 days, we'll help you. And she was absolutely fascinating, because there was food on the kitchen, we've got a kitchen in this corner, lots of food in free work. You can see we've started tracks and everything for her. We got nice raised licky mat type thing, raised pockets, raised floor forager. After probably, I don't know, 6 minutes, Daisy will suddenly go, oh, I need to go and look at the free food. And I said, this is really interesting, because there's still food in free work. Looks like Daisy's seeking free food, but actually what she's avoiding is actually being with us. She needs to leave. So after 6 minutes, she'd leave. So when we see a dog seeking something, we actually need to also look for what they're trying to avoid. So if they're always seeking contact on the head and pushing that lovely muzzle into your hands, is it because they don't want you to touch their hindquarters? You know, always have these question marks. By day 2, she was not needing to go and investigate the free treats on the side anymore. And you can just see it, her guardian's carrying the harness, and Daisy is remaining engaged and fluid. And we actually had to end the session for her, rather than her after, you know, no more than 6 minutes saying, I need to get out of here. So we look at what that language is. What's the starting language? What's that ending language? Not just in terms of body contact, like I said right at the beginning, but in all aspects of learning, because I think we keep sessions on too long. I think if we'd kept Daisy switched on with the clicker, she'd have done it. We could have worked her 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It would have been way too much. And the changes are so fast, where those bodies start to soften, the dog can dip in and dip out. The conversation has natural breaks, because we recognize that it's okay to have moments of quiet. And I liken it to, you know, feeling really comfortable with someone, where if you're a bit anxious, you might start talking really quickly. You might have to like drive the conversation all the time, because you're really like worried about not having that person engaged all the time. Or you'll be so anxious you actually can't speak at all, and the other person has to do all the filling in of that talk. And then maybe you'll say, oh yes, oh yeah, I really like Dobermans too, and then you'll share a bit about Dobermans, and then there's an awkward silence. That is what I sometimes feel it must be like for some dogs with us. And then you think about those amazing connections you have, where someone feels so familiar because maybe they are, or you've just got this immediate connection, and silences are just natural, and it's okay. They're just, you feel safe with silence. And I think we need to feel safe with silence with our dogs, because I think sometimes we feel that we can only show our love by doing, rather than just simply being. And I think as well, you know, we've probably been educated well to try and meet our dog's needs through activities, which is true and really meaningful. But I think, you know, with ACE free work, there's so many ways to meet that need in a more peaceful way, whilst learning more about our companions, helping them move in greater balance, helping to improve our observations, and really listening to what they have to say. So I'll finish with Mini Winnie. She's the little girl who the 3 stations were just 3 mats, one of which was her bed. She couldn't eat in front of her caregiver at all. She came from the most horrendous breeding farm in Ireland and was rescued by an animal welfare organisation here. She was used as a breeding bitch. She still has, and will probably always have, quite a strong startle response to certain things, but she couldn't eat in front of her guardian or anybody else. She couldn't engage with people. Her guardian is amazing. And on that first workshop where we just had 3 stations for her, she ate for the first time with one of those pickpocket caterpillars. And I think there's something really, remember I was saying about the nervous system, and it remembers, and it really does keep the score, and it is influenced by every single experience, even just a one-off experience. I think there's something really extraordinary about the pickpocket floor foragers that's different to snuffle mats. I think the sensation maybe of the warmth of the fleece, the foraging and the eating potentially triggers really early memories of being with siblings feeding from mum, because it has been life-changing for many dogs really quickly, and Mini Winnie was one of them. And when I got the caterpillar out and we were at the end of the room, she came in and her guardian was sitting next to her, and her guardian had to sit looking away from her. She started to eat, and we were like, oh, she's eating. And then we could actually look at her, and so could her guardian, and she carried on looking at us, but then eating. So of course I had to let her take her caterpillar home. So this is Mini Winnie now on her more recent visit. So she's now doing tracks. Her guardian's playing the counting game, which is the follow on from that country walk, joining the dog and then inviting that engagement with the dog, which I call what's this and let's explore. And as you can see, she's not worried about the different items, the unfamiliar people, and her guardian's waiting, you know, like, wait, great, don't rush her. It's not about luring. It's about an invitation, but there's still bits of food available in the snuffle mat. Her bed's off camera here, so that you can still see there's still food available on some of the other items. So it isn't that she has to stay engaged to get the food. It's if that engagement is truly meaningful for these dogs. And then we give them a finish or go free or go cue, whatever you want to call it. So they know they can disengage if they want to, but quite often they'll go, I'd like to carry on. And what's been really eye-opening too is dogs with new people, because we intro them in. Oh, shall I show you one more? This is somebody meeting Hendrix for the second time, actually. So we teach all the skills to the dog anyway first. So we understand the dog understands the concept, and the dog understands he's got choice. And then the new person with the dog's familiar person nearby takes over and starts that meeting the dog where he is, joining them, saying, would you like to come with me? And the dog can say yes or no. And what's been amazing is that they will often start that dip in, then they leave, then they come back, engage a bit longer, then they leave. This is Mags over here. And this is Louise's first time at free work. She's doing an amazing job. And for a dog who we had to start with just the foragers like Mini Winnie, oh my God, look at that. This is 5 weeks into his foster, we had to do meet and greets outside on a long line using Susan Clothier's Treat Retreat. And within 5 weeks, this is how we were able to introduce people safely, because this dog's amazing and free work is so beneficial. Like, this is the dog that couldn't touch anything plastic 5 weeks prior. And it's, I mean, he's not needing to check in with me. I'm meaningful to him. Mags is meaningful to him. It's just such a peaceful way. And we do the same with dog intros, making sure both dogs get the chance to be free on their own at first, obviously. You know, there really isn't any limitation to what you can do with free work. And I just come back over and over again to that internal environment of the dog, including what's happening with their heart rate and how we overwork them with the best intentions by keeping engagements, doing them maybe 5 times. Because in my experience, as I just said, they'll do 1, then they'll repeat twice, dip out, come back in, do 3, whatever it is we're asking them to do. And I've just found sort of more and more appreciation for how, with the best intentions, we overwhelm them, but how they cope, but how grateful they are when we actually hopefully join them on that same page. So I hope that's given you, oh my God, sorry, it's 9 o'clock. Oops. An overview of ACE and free work and where it's moving as well, because it's evolving so quickly, because every single dog adds more layers to the whole ACE approach. And, you know, like I said, I'm be excited to be, you know, a year further on in terms of what more I've seen in terms of observations, but equally, I can't wait to see where ACE ends up in a year's time, or certainly even 6 months, because there's just so much to learn from these amazing animals. So I will shut up now if anybody's got any questions, but if you just need to go to bed, that's okay too.
I think, Sarah, we could listen to you for like hours. I think I can speak for everyone on this.
Yeah.
So you guys can ask questions, but there are some as well in the chat. So maybe I'll start with those in the chat, if that's okay. So that's actually one from you, Sophie, the one where you ask if there is a particular part of the body that we should they should twitch when a dog dreams.
Yeah, I thought that stuff when you were talking about the dreaming was really, really interesting.
Yeah, you're going to see legs going, probably ears. When Henry gets into a really deep sleep, his whole body goes with the movement through his joints, because he's got such an incredible range of movement, which I'm thrilled to see. He's on Metacam at the moment. We explored paracetamol, and then paracetamol sort of, you know, on and off, and trying to find what worked for him. Paracetamol's great because it's a great top up for the Metacam. But when we were in between the where do we go now, it was really interesting how during REM sleep, he didn't really move that much. He had slight twitching, and I was like, he's definitely tighter. And the other big trick with assessing relaxation is to and general body relaxation, even in terms of undiagnosed pain, is the mobility of the skin. So I know when his skin gets tighter, he is uncomfortable. I can't say he's painful because I'm not in his body. I know he's uncomfortable, and that definitely limits the range of movement in those sleep twitches. So I know I need to either change the routine for the pain med or change the engagement. So maybe he's been through too much long grass or too much slippery mud or something. What did we do that was different, that was not so helpful the day before? So watch, because your dog's dream pattern might change over the course of the week or the month. Let me know. It's fascinating.
Yeah, no, thank you. It does, that really, really does make sense, because I was observing my dog only like moving her feet a little bit, but then knowing the difference between like a deep sleep and not, because I could get up and then she would suddenly snap out of it. So I know she's not in like deep sleep. No, thank you. That's really, really helpful.
Thank you.
Sophie, you asked another question in the chat. So since you're on now, I'll ask.
Sorry. It was just all like, oh, okay. I could hang on to your work, Sarah. Honestly, I'm so inspired. I'm like, oh my life, brain blown.
Thank you. Oh, I just love it. I'm passionate about it. Passionate.
Yeah.
So Sophie, you asked about the setting up the free work session for a bouncy adolescent, and if is it worth to set it up first in the garden before letting the dog wander and investigate on a long line.
So I know it's a really like practical sort of question, but I do work with like a lot of adolescents that are like, you know, put down a couple of bits and they're like you said before, oh, they pick up one thing and throw it, oh, I'm done with that or whatever. So putting stuff more together, would it be worthwhile having them outside, for example, setting it all up so then they can go in with a long line?
And also what we found with dogs like that, because Henry started this bit off, we were already obviously doing stuff on the lead with dogs as part of TTouch years ago, but what I recognized was dogs going, I need to look at pigeons because I need to disengage because this is difficult, that we weren't actually giving them choice. And so for the youngsters, they were going to be more likely to grab the lead in those moments, and certainly Henry was the lead grabber. And so it's about saying what's happening in your nervous system. And what Henry was doing and Cookie Dough was doing was coming up, using their teeth to engage with me and hanging off me. So Henry just looked at one of the cavaletti blocks in the arena, and I went towards it and put a treat down, and I'm like, my God, he gets to jump up with his paws and he gets to use his teeth on a piece of food, not a piece of clothing or my skin. And that's how that all started, combined with all the snuffle mats, the banks of snuffle mats Cookie had taught me, the ball pit Cookie had taught me 14 years ago. I'm not saying I'm the only person that would have come up with a ball pit, because it's an easy transfer from kids. But she was a dog that started it because it was in one of the books, and then people started to share that. She was certainly one of the founder members of the Ball Pit Club, shall I say, so that she had control of noise. So it's been shaped by adolescent dogs. And what we discovered was that for a lot of these youngsters, it's the softness that triggers that arousal. So having the harder stuff like the plastic balls for Cookie Dough and the stools that you saw with Jonty and the cavaletti blocks that Henry seemed to gravitate towards, so I just took it, and that was the start of this walking towards stations. I'd already introduced stations at shelters because it's so much easier to teach dogs to walk towards stations, and they come out of kennels instead of scanning the horizon looking for other dogs, sometimes resident cats, people. They really quickly learn station. And I was laying stations in serpentine, so we were helping the shelter dogs curve through the body. But, you know, obviously we can't always have them off the lead. It's not safe when you're walking around site, obviously. So I for a lot of these aroused dogs of any age, harder surfaces seem to be less triggering for them. And also, if you think about what an adolescent dog is learning in terms of predation, all dogs have the end of that predatory sequence bred into them, the consumption, obviously. But a lot of them, even if they don't necessarily have the stalk or the chase, they have dissection. So I think as well, that softness is almost triggering that need to start ripping off that flesh or feather. So what I'll do as well, if a dog does get really aroused around soft items like Henry used to, I had an older bull breed actually that used to, I make sure that I give them a cardboard box so they get that dissection bit done, and then I follow it up with a rabbit's ear or another chew, so then they get the consumption part. So again, it's sort of setting up what might be appropriate for these dogs. So you might find, I know my dogs aren't going to eat cardboard. And I never put smeary food around cardboard, so I don't ever want the cardboard to taste or to smell of food to trigger them to eat it. So again, I'll play, but also have something of your scent maybe available in that like an old face cloth, you know, they're cheap as chips, aren't they, from places like Tesco, and just have a stash of them and put it near you. You know, scent transfers really quickly, but we want that scent to be like really embedded in that item. Because the other thing that Henry and Hendrix taught me last year was, because of lockdown, and Emily, my older daughter, lives in London, she couldn't come home for a long time. And when Henry saw her, he went mad. He was so excited. He went to jump on her lap, but he actually ended up on her head because of the momentum. We were outside, we could only be in the garden. And she had a handbag, we had loads of stuff in the garden. He didn't touch anything apart from a plastic bag that she'd had for quite some time. And he just took off around the garden with it, like flying a flag. And I thought, bloody hell, he wants her scent. He needs to carry her scent. And he wouldn't do it with a handbag. And then I thought, my God, you know, some of this mouthing that we see in some of these youngsters, again, is this not a need to like get that scent exchange from that person, that familiar person, or the person that's slightly bothersome? Doesn't matter. So when somebody came to visit Hendrix, who knew him at Battersea, because he came down from Battersea, she brought him a new toy and he was just not interested. He grabbed her sleeve. And I said, do you know what? I've learned this from Henry. I think this is a thing. So next time she came to visit, she bought him a piece of her old clothing, and he took it and he just kept his feet on the floor, waggling his body, parading with her piece of clothing. So that might be helpful for some of these adolescent dogs too, that you give them like the leg of an old jean, obviously not something that's meaningful to you, because there's a high chance they're going to destroy it. But they need that scent from you. They really do. And the adolescent brain is like, I need to practice all these things, but I just don't know in what order, and it's all coming really fast because I'm just responding to my biological, you know, messaging and the environment. So play. You know, for some adolescent dogs, that soft piece of clothing is going to be too much. For some dogs, that might be the missing piece, along with those harder stations like the 3 stools that we had initially for Jonty. I think it just doesn't trigger that arousal that I think is a natural part of the adolescent brain. I really do. And I think that's why, again, that pulling on the sleeve is so common, or the trouser leg. I think there's resistance, but I think it's also part of the practice for that pulling, that dissection, you know, so it's trying to meet all those needs. Does that make sense? I've gone on.
Yes, it does. No, thank you. That really does make sense.
Look at the dog in front of you. What does he need to do with his body? How can we meet that need?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then Alexis, you asked about a book. Is there a book, I assume, about the observations on free work? Is that what you meant, Alexis?
Not yet.
Yeah.
I'm leaving tomorrow to go to my lovely little cottage in Suffolk to finish it. Yeah, I did have a deadline of last year. I didn't meet that deadline.
Because I remember you mentioning.
Yes. Well, it's been like, oh, catch up. You know, COVID's gone on and on and on, obviously. So yes, it's nearly finished. It's 50,000 words have been written. But the other problem, Alexis, is every dog teaches me something new. I'm like, I need to put that
She
in.
has a chapter.
Yeah, it's never going to be finished, ever. Because it's life-changing. And also at the beginning, I used to put too much stuff out. And I've learned to strip back to, you know, what we call now 3 stations from an observation point of view. And then like so many more layouts to encourage this beautiful flexion ultimately. So I'm kind of like, I don't actually know where to stop writing.
It's quite a nice problem to have, though, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Sarah, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. Can I be rude and ask whereabouts in Suffolk? Because I'm across the border in Norfolk.
Are you?
Yeah.
I'm near Woodbridge.
All right, yeah, it's about an hour away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just off the A12. I love it. It's my parents' cottage. I inherited it. It's been in the family, oh gosh, quite a long time, and it's my beautiful escape. When I drive over that Orwell Bridge, this big breath and just it's magic. We live in a very beautiful part of the world, because my family are on my dad's side are from Cambridgeshire too, so I kind of know sort of East Anglia reasonably well.
Yeah, I'm sort of 6 miles south of Yarmouth, so
lovely.
about an hour away. Yeah.
Nice.
One thing I wanted to say, I know that the book is in production, but I seem to remember on the website there are quite a lot of resources, aren't there?
On our website, there's not so much. It's Ace Connections. The Facebook group there are, We're hopelessly behind with updating the website. It's kind of thrown together in 2018 as animal-centered education was incorporated, and hasn't really been revisited since, because, well, where have the last 2 years gone, and what nightmares have everybody been faced with? So yes, we're starting the rebuild of that with more resources for people that aren't on Facebook as well, because I am passionate about sharing this. It's too good not to share. I people, business coaches will say never give anything free. Okay, that's fine. That's just not who I am as a person. And I just, this work has been created by dogs and for dogs, and it should be given to dogs, in my humble opinion. That's just my own philosophy. Of course we have to pay bills. Love doesn't pay the mortgage or feed the animals or pay the vet's bills, does it? Of course. But it's so simple.
Yeah.
Everyone can use it. It's so user friendly. I'm like, have it. Not all of it. I'll share deeper layers with people like you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
you have been very generous with, as I say, with giving the information on free work, and that also because in the Ace Connection Facebook group also there is a lot of resourcing again, and ideas, videos from other people and stuff. It's such a nice group. It's a very active group, so it's brilliant.
It's an amazing group. We've got such a mixed membership as well. We've got veterinary physios, vets, vet nurses, dog trainers, dog behaviorists, horse trainers, horse behaviorists. We've got massage therapists. We've got such a broad spectrum. People that specialize in puppies. We've got police dog handlers in there from my local police team. We've got assistants dog trainers. We've got such a beautiful mixed bag, and everyone is so polite and kind and generous and supportive. And somebody said, oh, you must have to do a lot of adminning behind the scenes, but you know what, I actually don't have to. There's the occasional trigger post, the occasional trigger word, but I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've had to step in and delete a post or message somebody to say I'm really sorry, or I'm sure you didn't mean it to come over like this, but in the 3 years that it's been going, probably 5 times. So it's beautiful group.
Fantastic. Yeah.
More questions. Sorry, more questions. Go.
So there is another question from the chat from Caroline. So Caroline was saying, would you suggest to video the free work session and rewatch them in slow-mo, which is something I actually do.
Yes.
Would you also suggest that?
Definitely, provided the animal's fine with that. I think there's great value in videoing, and that's something that came to my awareness from doing court cases, because I would have somebody with me filming so that I could play it back and watch for the nuance in the dog, because you can't see it when you're right on top of the dog. That was another reason why free work, I think, is so much more valuable when you're starting observations, because you're free to look at the dog going through a range of movement patterns. Hopefully you can stand back and see more about that limb placement. Some dogs aren't comfortable, obviously, so we need to factor that in. So we might just have on a tripod and just hope that we've got capturing what we've got rather than holding it. But what was really interesting with Pansy, the lovely sight hound, was the first session, I put way too much stuff out. That was in, you know, the early days, and being excited by, oh, can put all this stuff out and they can just move freely around it, was that I didn't recognize while I was with her, because I was talking to the behaviourist and the team from kennels, she was from kennels, that she had a preference to go anti-clockwise around the room, which is quite common. When she was out and she was worried by the sight of donkeys, or if she saw a dog and became quite aroused, her amazing handler was turning her to the right. And I said, that's really interesting, because having watched the video, she can't actually flex to the right. So far from removing her from a stressful situation by turning her to the right, more stress was actually being added. So moving to the right, Pansy couldn't eat a reward for turning away. But when we turned then to the left, because we changed it for the second session, because I'd rewatched the video, she could take the treat straight away and could turn straight away and could take that breath straight away, having stood and watched 2 pheasants fighting right in front of her. She's like, oh yeah, I can float off to the left. Whereas with the right, she'd keep lunging and barking and couldn't eat, because it was uncomfortable. And then on x-ray, because I said she really needs to go back to the vet, she's really touch sensitive too, they discovered she had arthritis in the neck, lumbar spine, and she had a crooked spine. She'd been born with a deformed spine. So again, rewarding education versus reward-based training. The rewarding education part is establishing that Pansy can't turn right, establishing that left is easy, she's already crabbing to the left anyway, she has got undiagnosed pain, she needs pain relief, we can set all the stations at the right height for her so she can access it, we'll start that drip feed of body work, versus reward-based training, let's turn you away to the right, click and give you a treat. Not remotely rewarding. I'm saying it, you know, like that's all they did. Of course it isn't. But you can see the difference between one way of connecting versus one way of trying to educate.
Are there any more questions? Any question? I know I can see a comment from Mare, actually, it's quite interesting. She says that she sees how much it's all evolved from when she was last the early days.
Need to come back.
Yeah. Tell you what, I think maybe Mare can teach me how to camp, and I'll come too.
There's some great dog-friendly accommodation in the village.
Yeah, that's what I need.
Remember Fun Run camping holiday.
There were very helpful people at the campsite. Very helpful people at the campsite. Sue Williamson saved me.
Can we do some glamping?
And
then
yeah.
I like the Harry Potter kind of glamping though. That kind. So if there aren't any more questions,
they're probably exhausted. It's 9:30. Sorry, so sorry.
There is
I
one
did warn
question.
Debbie, I can talk forever.
There is one question I think that's been missed, unless I wasn't listening. Caroline asked about videoing. Is that a suggestion to video the dogs?
Yeah,
I've just talked about that. Yeah.
All right, sorry. I wasn't listening.
No,
Caroline's actually asking something else. If there is anyone, because she's in Scotland, if there is anyone up as far, sorry, if there's anyone teach as far up as us in the Highlands, we are so limited as to what we can get up her way. So is there anything up in Scotland for her to learn from?
Tracy McLennan is in Stirling, so low down, Glasgow, between Glasgow and Edinburgh, but also she hasn't been down, you know, no one's been able to come and update. We've been doing it online, although Tracy has done some of the online stuff. Lovely Louise, who was in that video with Hendrix doing the ACE first dates, is somewhere over on their east coast, but I can't remember where. So she's going through the program at the moment.
Where can we find their details? Is there on your website?
Well, she's not listed yet, but if you look, we haven't got many qualified people, because I like people to take sort of a year and a half minimum, because I can give you obviously loads of information. The true skill comes from it becoming a part of you through practice. So we could do a really condensed course and dish out a certificate, but you have not then had the opportunity to connect with 10, 20, 30 dogs. So we do a course, we do a practical, we do 6 months, you come back, repeat next layers online, upload your practice videos, come back for practical, and that kind of goes on like that. So because we're kind of only 3 years old, really, there aren't that many people. But if you email me, I can see who might be near you, who might be on our training program, but I'd have to obviously then get their permission to say, can I put you all in touch? Because we have got people a little nearer you than me, who's down here in the southwest of England.
So would you be okay if I give your email to Caroline to get in touch?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So Carol, that's what I'll do then. I'll send you an email with Sarah's email, and then you get in touch.
But also start too, you know, play, explore. I really encourage people to have fun with it and explore. I really, really do.
Yeah. And we're all waiting for your book now.
I'm waiting for my book as well.
You're waiting for your book.
Publisher's waiting for the book, yes. Keep saying sorry.
So Sarah, thank you so much for this evening. Again, I think I speak for everyone in saying how amazing it's been. Learned so much, and yet still have some questions. Good, but like good questions. The dogs hopefully will answer. And
keep in touch. Yeah, message, email me. I'm always happy to help if I can. So
thank you so much. Yeah, again, Sarah, your generosity is incredible. So thank you very, very much. And we'll all come camping with you.
Yes. We'll drink heavily.
And especially Mary's gonna lead this thing. I'm never gonna let it go.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So everyone have a lovely evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.